What I say to leadership teams, Mike, when I teach them that is, but if we do that and then the leadership team, or worse yet, the visionary, the founder, the owner, is the only person in the organization equipped with the tools to solve those issues, you're going to be the guy replacing the empty toilet paper roll in the men's room when it's out, dealing with the two employees who argue about the same parking spot every day. Leadership teams shouldn't worry about that stuff. So we teach a tool called IDS, Identify, Discuss, Solve, to literally every human in the business who's in a meeting on a weekly basis and has the opportunity to put issues on their own issues list, tee them up, identify the real root cause, that's the I, discuss briefly with their teammates what they could do to solve it, decide to solve it by implementing a plan of attack that'll make it go away forever, and taking action on that plan, and that's the solve. And by that, we're helping these teams of people solve their own issues.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, where we look into the many facets of the job, the career, and the lifestyle of investment and insurance product wholesaling. I, of course, am your host, Awesome Mike, the creator of the Awesome Wholesaler Experience, and yours truly. Hey, everyone, I have to almost break my arm patting myself in the back. I have a terrific guest for you today, and I think that you're really going to enjoy him. I thoroughly have in my research, as well as just being a fan of his for years. So maybe a tip of the hat to Kelly Knight as well for the intro. So appreciate you, Kelly, for doing that. But let me introduce you. It is Mr. Mike Paton, the one and only. Now, he has been learning from entrepreneurs his whole life. His parents were entrepreneurs. He's became a huge advocate, and today he wants to give back to entrepreneurs. And he does this both as an award-winning professional speaker, a best-selling author, and he's even been a certified EOS implementer, and recently has donned the crown. That's right, he is now the visionary for the ever-popular EOS Worldwide, which stands for Entrepreneurial Operating Systems. If you've been under a rock and don't know that already. Maybe one of his shiniest jewels in his crown, though, is that he graduated from The Ohio State University. However, he now calls Minneapolis home. Mike, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm terrific. Thanks, Mike.
Let me just brief the audience and tell them, if I call you Peyton, you like that. I'm not being disrespectful. I'm not, maybe Mr. Peyton would be more appropriate, but I appreciate you coming on regardless. You know, usually I have kind of an off-colored, well, let me try this one. I was going to skip it, but what the heck. You say you're a sports fan. You say you use analogies of sports. But I looked into your history a little bit, and Mike, is running really a sport?
Well, it depends on who you're running from, Mike. That's the answer to that question.
Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike was a collegiate level runner. So, and he can tell you probably more about running that we need to know. Technique, it's very technical. And get the right wind speed. I'm aerodynamically inclined for running and swimming, if you haven't known. Noticed?
But, it's a very efficient playbook, very short playbook for the running team.
That's good. Which one do you start with? When you start, do you start with your left foot or your right foot? anyways, I digress. No disrespect to my running fans, by the way. Running is a mental game, indeed, and that probably is where the majority of elite sports are won and lost, is at the mental level. Now, of course, being a born and bred son of Michigan, I might not know much about sports. But I digress from the Ohio State University. But, you know, your latest project is interesting. And when I say latest, I mean Get a Grip. And I know you've got some things that are going on besides that. But that book in particular, Peyton, it's a parable. So can you tell us why you and Gino decided to write it as a parable instead of a different style of writing?
Yeah, you bet. So, I'll create a little context for where we were in the journey when we decided to write the book. Gino had self-published Traction, the first iteration of Traction. And I had been an EOS implementer and had grown a successful practice. I was probably a year or two into my experience as a professional EOS implementer. And I graduated with a degree in English and have always been a creative writer and a content producer my whole career. And so I had on my VTO, my strategic plan for my implementer business, to write a book. And so I approached Gino one quarter at our quarterly collaborative exchange. And I said, hey, Gino, I'm interested in writing an EOS content book. Would you be okay with that? And he said, well, what are you thinking? And I said, well, I'd like to write a business fable, a story to tell about a company working with an implementer to implement EOS, because I think there are some readers that would get more value or would stay connected to that kind of book longer than maybe they do traction. I was speaking of myself, for the record, as a visionary. I need a story with characters whose well-being I am concerned about to follow through on a business book. And he said, well, that's funny. I've got the same idea on my VTO, and why don't we collaborate? And so then we were off. So that's why we decided to do it that way. It just felt like a good idea. And we had 3 objectives. Number one, so a lot of visionary entrepreneurs, the founders of entrepreneurial companies, will start reading Traction, and it's a really engaging, easy to consume, simple, practical guide, but it is still a how-to guide for implementing EOS in a business. And so a lot of visionary entrepreneurs will read the first chapter of Traction and then hand it to somebody like Kelly Knight and say, here, you go do this. And so one of the reasons we wrote Get a Grip was for the visionary entrepreneur to get engaged with the book and sort of stay with it long enough to understand the role of the visionary in a successful EOS implementation. We also wrote it because we wanted our implementer community to have a guide for the life they're going to live and the journey they're going to take with their clients. And then the last reason was to create a real world parable, as you say, for what a company experiencing EOS looks and feels like, because it gave us the opportunity to teach the practical application a little more fully than the how-to guide, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, there have been a couple of great educators in human history that exclusively used parables.
Yeah. And Patrick Lencioni being one of them. And, that his work has certainly been the inspiration for a lot of the thinking around that. But his books are my favorite business books because I get engaged immediately. I start caring about the characters, and in caring about the characters, I learn faster and retain better. And so that was kind of one of the inspirations for the book.
I give you much credit, much respect, and a lot of the teams that are out there that are listening, you can do the same. You can create this parable, this kind of, I guess it's a pseudo fictitious world to deliver your story, and it is much more endearing. It's much more memorable. Think about Aesop's fable. Well, everybody knows the tortoise and the hare. They don't know maybe about the sprinter versus the marathon runner, or the,
right.
If it was binary, it wouldn't be as memorable. So I appreciate you doing that. You are a Midwest guy, as far as I can tell. At least you have been for quite some time.
Yep.
Did you grow up in Ohio, or did you grow up in Minnesota?
I moved to Ohio before my 6th grade year from Santa Barbara, California. And I moved to northeastern Ohio, just outside of Cleveland, in a little town called Kent, the home of Kent State University. So yes, mostly my formative years were in Ohio, young childhood in California.
Yeah, it's a great part of the country. I've been there for years. Akron's right very close there, and
yep.
Yeah, it's a great part of the country. So then you went up to Ohio State and made the family proud. Well, maybe not actually, because they're entrepreneurs. They're thinking, okay, you're going to go spend all this money to get a fancy ring and to root for a good football team. Great, but then you kind of became the black sheep of the family. You're like, hey, I'm going to go to work for a bank.
That's correct.
Banking. What happened, Mike? What happened?
Well, funny story. I was a competitive public speaker in college, and my public speaking coach at Ohio State had taken a job as a management training, or as the training leader for a small S&L headquartered in Columbus, Ohio, and they were looking for a management trainee with a different background than their typical management trainee with a finance degree and maybe an MBA. And I had kind of a liberal arts education and background. And so they brought me in to interview, and I managed to survive a gauntlet of interviews and get hired. And it was a great opportunity for a young person to learn an entire business from the ground up, working with all the executives. So it was a great opportunity, thrilled about it. But when I told my dad about it, he quoted Mark Twain. He said, "You know what Mark Twain said about a banker, don't you?" And I said, "No, Dad, I don't." He said, "Well, banker's a guy who gives you an umbrella when it's nice outside and takes it back the minute it starts to rain."
Ouch.
Yeah. So he said, "You're not the only person to invoke the black sheep analogy in this story." So it's a great place to learn about human nature, great place to learn about leadership, great place to learn about a business from the perspective of its numbers and its financial stability and that sort of thing. So I learned a lot, very grateful for the experience, but I definitely was most at home when I was hanging out with my clients and not really feeling comfortable when I was hanging out with other bankers.
Yeah, and your resume says that. Your resume shows that, the fact that you did stay there and you kind of, what do you call it, hold the row for the banking industry, but about a decade, and that's about it. You started to become more mature, you started a family, and you kept getting pulled, and I'm asking you this more than telling you, but it seemed like you kept getting pulled back to that cowboy, that entrepreneur mentality,
Yeah.
even if it was in sales, it wasn't in the management.
Yeah. So the only thing I'll disagree with is I'm not sure I kept getting more mature. I've been wondering what I was going to do when I grow up my whole life, and I'm still wondering. I knew from the start that banking was a good business, and I wanted to learn as much as I could, but that it never felt like the last parking stall, if that makes sense. And so the whole time I'm learning about people, I'm learning about business, I'm learning about entrepreneurship, and at one point I got a great opportunity to join one of my clients' leadership teams and help lead sales and marketing for a growing entrepreneurial company. And after that, I ended up with 4 of those opportunities, running or helping run an entrepreneurial company in, frankly, 4 different industries, 4 completely different experiences. I had 2 great successes and 2 dismal failures, train wrecks. And, as any entrepreneur will tell you, you learn a hell of a lot more from your mistakes than you do your successes. And so great learning experiences. And the 4th experience brought me to Minneapolis. I had an opportunity to run a $7 million company for a founder that I was doing some business with. And 3 days in, I knew I had made a terrible mistake leaving the old organization and coming here. And I spent a year trying to figure out how to connect with this person and run the business, take it to the next level without frustrating people around me. It was a terrible culture fit for me. And one of the things that I uncovered in my search for an answer was EOS. A neighbor introduced me to Gino and to the book Traction had just been published. And I read it, and literally in a day, couldn't put it down, loved it, very consistent with all my philosophies and thinking about how to build a successful organization, but put together in a simpler, cleaner, more practical, more simple framework that I could see everybody benefiting from. And I got really excited about it, and the rest is history.
Yeah, the book is terrific. It's not written with crayon, but it's that comfortable. It feels like it's a very comfortable coloring book, no nonsense. We're going to talk a lot about that platform that you are now literally, I said the king, being funny, but you're definitely the leader of that organization. Congratulations on that. I know it's happened within the last year or so, I believe, and a great man for the job. But so you go to Minneapolis. Now, I'm familiar with both Columbus and Minneapolis, and there's a significant voting structure change there. You're going from conservative HQ to let's say a liberal or Democratic HQ. Was that change in location? Was it a shocker, or did you find a way to kind of find the hubs and the nooks and crannies of Old Town there in Minneapolis?
Yeah, and what I would say is I think that is I think that perception is a macro perception that's really inaccurate in the trenches, right? I think Columbus and Minneapolis have way more similarities than they do differences. Columbus, I have always said, is a lot like the St. Paul part of the Twin Cities, financial capital downtown, government downtown, et cetera. But the people are the people. We're Midwestern values. I mean, the funny part about Minneapolis is a lot of people from Minneapolis refuse to acknowledge that Ohio is part of the Midwest. No, that's the East, right? And so I get in a funny art, but they're great people. They care about the people around them. The people here, like Columbus, believe that you have to create something of value before you ask for anything in return. I've been thrilled to death to live in both communities, and I can't say enough but good things about both of them.
You sound like a politician. You're playing both sides of the coin.
Yeah, and I'm not. I imagine as the podcast wears on, you'll have that demonstrated for you.
Yeah, I'm very fond of both towns too, and I believe, and maybe you would confirm this thought, Paton, is you find what you're looking for, no matter where you are.
That's
if
right.
You want to find the 5 reasons why Detroit's the best place to live. They're here. Well, at least maybe 3. Let's say 3. But then if you want to find the 5 reasons why it's the worst place, you'll find those. So it really is about what you're looking for.
That's
I believe,
right.
no matter where you are. So what were you, I can kind of play off of that. What were you looking for when you decided to become an EOS implementer? Was that going to be a fulfillment thing? Was it more revenue for you? Was it freedom from the corporate structure? What was it?
Yeah, so I flew off to Detroit to meet Gino and participate in boot camp, unsure of what I was looking for, to be honest with you, curious that and thinking that perhaps this was going to be something I could leverage to add value for entrepreneurs. I've always been passionate about helping entrepreneurs. I had been doing it as a banker. I then did it from the inside as a leader, runner of these companies. And so I was curious, and quite frankly, my mindset wasn't, this is what I'm going to be spending the rest of my life dedicating myself to. But I've teased Gino for 12 years now that he had a purple, vat of purple Kool-Aid in the office somewhere, and I drank it because I literally flew home knowing that everything I had done in my career and my life up to that point had prepared me for this moment, and that I had a really special opportunity to help him share this powerful system and process and set of tools with the world. And that if I just focused on being as good at that work as I possibly could, good things were going to happen for Gino and his business partner, Don Tinney, and for me and for the community of implementers and for entrepreneurs around the world. And I've spent 12 years seeing that happen day in and day out. And it's been, easily the best professional 12 years of my career by a lot.
Let's peel back some layers of that EOS onion, if you would, and kind of tell us, what have you been doing for 12 years? And if I can just kind of remind you that the audience is going to be this group of professional investment personnel, whether it's a wholesaler, a national sales manager for a distribution team, financial advisor, RIAs. We're all kind of in the same idea of serving clients, investors with investments and planning. Can you break down? I know there's the fundamental that I got was there's 6 major key components to the EOS platform. Can you tell us and share us about those?
Yeah, and for your listeners, what I'll say is EOS is just a complete set of simple, practical tools that help people run a great business and live a great life. We call it an operating system, entrepreneurial operating system, the way you operate your organization. And at its core, what an EOS implementer like me and Gino Wickman do is we get a leadership team of an entrepreneurial company. Our clients are almost all privately held entrepreneurial organizations with between 10 and 250 people whose owners and leaders are growth-oriented, open-minded, want to take the business to the next level, and want some help. And we get them in a room, and in a series of full-day sessions with the leadership team, we help them adopt this system that strengthens the 6 key components of their business. And those components are the vision component, getting you all 100% on the same page with where you're going and how you plan to get there. the people component, surrounding yourself with great people with a clear, simple definition of what kind of person makes them great in your organization. Strengthening your data component, which is the ability to run your business on facts and figures rather than emotions and egos and highs and lows as the business environment changes. The issues component, the ability to solve your issues at the root for the long-term greater good rather than letting them linger for weeks, months, or even years. The process component, which is getting the most important stuff done the right and best way in your business every day without creating bureaucracy or a bunch of robots running around not being able to think for themselves and be flexible. And then the traction component, bringing the vision down to the ground, instilling discipline and accountability everywhere in the organization. So when you walk around and watch other people work, they're executing on your vision and owning the achievement of that vision. So those are the 6 key components.
Yeah, and they just keep peeling that onion back. Not that it's an onion, but the layers of the company or the structure back. No, a lot of the folks that are listening are outside field territory sales reps. So they're on a team, but it's a team of one often, maybe 2. They might have an inside salesperson that they rely on and kind of work with on a daily, and then they might have a manager, and then he might have so depends on how big the company is. By the way, they're all entrepreneurial driven, so this is good fruit for them to really become nourished on. But that guy that's out there, and I've been that guy for 2 decades, and I'm out there trying to raise money for this investment company. What do you see as some of the kind of key components that could help a sales guy, an outside sales guy, to implement the kind of the EOS structure, even if it's in his own little world, Paton?
Yeah, so I would provide a disclaimer to say one of the EOS creed is you cannot run a great business on multiple operating systems. You must choose one. So because when you have some people in an organization want to run the business one way and another group of people in the business who want to run it a different way, and you're butting heads about how we make decisions, who's accountable for what do we prioritize right now? There's so much time wasted in those fruitless debates that if you just all go work on your own priorities, you probably have moved the company. So the one thing I don't want to do is have that guy out there tell his manager, I'm running my practice on EOS and I don't give a darn what you're doing. That would be a mistake. So getting everybody on the same page about how we're going to run the business is really important. But assuming you're independently capable of creating your own vision of the future and doing a better job of creating real clear lines of accountability for your own performance and the performance of the people who report to you or work alongside you, and checking in regularly, let's say weekly and quarterly, for an example, on whether or not you're actually keeping your numbers on track, moving your priorities forward, and finishing what you said you were going to finish this quarter at the end of the quarter. EOS has a lot of simple, practical tools that can help you be more accountable for moving your organization forward and achieving whatever it is you want to achieve.
Yeah, that's a tremendous amount of valuable content you just laid on the table there. Let's take a piece of part of it. I've discovered through my experience and some readings that there is a distinct difference in the motivation, in the activities, and in the emotional reasoning that a salesperson has versus what the manager has. And the salesperson's job is, or mental point, or their intention is to have a great life, to make a bunch of money, to get that the praise and public now help people. It's different than a manager's. I find that a manager, and this might sound disparaging, but a lot of times a manager wants to not make a mistake. They don't want to become blamed if something goes wrong. So they're a little bit risk averse to trying new things or rocking the boat. Yet they do want to have some of the credit if things go right. And that sounds kind of demeaning and disparaging towards management. I'm not trying to mean it that way. But do you see a similar thing where there's a pretty big difference between the frontline salesperson's activity and interest and the manager's?
Yeah. So short answer is Managers, macro, maybe. Good managers, no. Okay. A good manager wants to support and harness the independent motivations of his or her salespeople. So you're talking to a guy who has a lifetime of being a salesperson, and then a leader and manager of salespeople, and then a leader of organizations. And I can tell you that being a salesperson is challenging and difficult and requires a lot of internal motivation. Managing salespeople requires a lot of patience and internal motivation and listening skills. And those two disciplines are completely different, which is why so many successful individual sales contributors don't make the transition to managing salespeople very well, because they're just being asked to work outside their own comfort zones. But I've also seen some amazing manager of salespeople who have great instincts as to what they allow their people to do with their own style and their own approach and their own motivation. And they're only asking for alignment and compliance, if you will, when it's absolutely necessary for the greater good of the organization. And they can sell the need for alignment and compliance to people who don't like, to the cowboys and cowgirls out there. And so the bottom line is, if you got a manager who's tamping down your personal passion for excellence, you got a lousy manager, and you got to have a conversation with that person about how they can be an effective partner of yours in what you're trying to accomplish. And you're not going to win every battle. One of the things I learned when I graduated into successful management of salespeople is that sometimes when you have 12 people and there are 12 different ways of doing things, you need them to all align around a couple of things, or you're going to lose your mind because you're trying to manage 12 different systems at the same time. And so I developed a little bit of empathy for the people that I used to report to. It's so much so that I took a number of them to lunch and apologized for being that cowboy that you referenced earlier, because I was not easy to manage at all.
Yeah, I do see a difference in two different, basically, ends of the spectrum. One is a manager takes over a management role and immediately aligns himself with little salespeople that are many of themselves, and they literally cut away and get rid of people that are of a different motivational thread, or basically don't act and breathe just like they do. Is that smart to do, or is it smarter to have this colorful, diverse group of people that may be bringing different inputs and different experiences in to make the a synergistic greater sum?
Well, and again, what we try and do when we're having a bit of a people conversation using the 6 key components, and a bit of a process conversation or process for your listeners north of the border. So from a people standpoint, what we've learned, and the book How to Be a Great Boss, which was written by Gino Wickman and my colleague Renee Bohr, lays out the EOS approach to leading and managing to drive accountability. And so what a good leader and manager does is drive accountability for excellence, for getting results and following the rules, for lack of a better term, sharing the core values, following the processes to make the people around you better at their job while you're doing your job. And so a good leader and manager does 10 things. We call them the 5 leadership disciplines and the 5 management disciplines really well. And part of the underpinning of that philosophy, Mike, is that leadership and management are 2 distinct capabilities. Leadership is high level, 30,000 foot inspirational stuff. Management is in the trenches, clear expectations, driving accountability, communication, working alongside with your people. And if you have a team of people reporting to you, you have to be good at those 2 things, whatever style you have. So for your listeners who are struggling either being led or managed, or being a leader and manager, I'd urge them to take a look at How to Be a Great Boss. And you're going to get some tremendous insights, not just for what you could do better as a leader and manager, but from where you might be experiencing pain with your leader and manager. It'll pinpoint it for you.
That's great advice. One of the fascinating concepts that you guys have is this idea of a visionary is not the end all, one all, be all, but the best visionaries have a kind of a partner, and you call this partner. Is it? I get them mixed up a lot, but is it the integrator or the implementer?
Great.
It's
You
the
got it.
integrator. Great.
Yep.
So sometimes, in fact, when I was the best in my career, I had a great integrator, and it allowed me. I'm a 10 quick start on the Colby A index. So, and I've recovered. I'm in therapy for it.
Yeah.
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 And but my best partner, they would actually not try to compete with me as far as idea creation, but they were excellent at completion and even at telling me no. So how do you find that, and what are some of the key ways that you can make sure that relationship on a binary level works?
Yeah, so the visionary is the big idea person, loves big relationships, often has the finger on the pulse of the industry or the culture of the company, the high level sort of gut feel kind of inspirational folks. But when you suck them into the trenches, when you force them to have tough conversations with people who don't get it or aren't accountable or aren't executing well, it just drains the energy from them. And so what happens with a lot of entrepreneurial companies is visionaries are great business starters and great at through sheer will and determination and passion, smashing through the first 22 ceilings your business hits as it grows from 0 to 20 or 40 or 100 employees. But at some point, the owner's job in that organization starts requiring way more of the stuff a visionary doesn't like doing and way less of the creative, new idea, let's go this way and that way kind of stuff. It's inevitable. And so what happens is a lot of those visionaries get stuck in what we call the integrator seat, and they get unhappy and the people around them are going crazy. One of my clients referred to the working directly for a visionary who was in control of the company was like being Wile E. Coyote at the bottom of the canyon after all the boulders at the top of the canyon have fallen, and they're all, they got the little umbrella that says help on it, because there's just so many ideas and so many changes of directions. And so when you reach that point, the owner or the entrepreneur or the visionary is frustrated, and the people reporting to the visionary are inundated with too much stuff, it's time to look at getting an integrator. And the EOS, the Traction Library book that teaches visionary integrator most thoroughly, we definitely bring it up in the other books, is called Rocket Fuel. So again, your listeners should look at that. But that's what those two roles are. And the way you go find one is you first figure out what kind of what kind of integrator you as a visionary really need to be your perfect puzzle piece, because it's different for every kind of visionary. There are lots of different types of visionaries out there, and what the right candidate for your unique organization would be. And then once you've got that clear, you go out and find them, and there's a process in Rocket Fuel for how you onboard them, how you build a strong relationship, how you let go of the vine to let them run with the day-to-day and drive performance and accountability at the leadership level of your organization.
Yeah, I believe there's even it's in one of the books, I think it's Rocket Fuel, there's a questionnaire that kind of helps to really clarify those roles and determine, where the match might be.
Correct. And for your people listening out there, two kinds of indications you might have a problem here and need to study this is, sometimes you've got the visionary stuck in the integrator role and you're dealing with that thing I've already explained. You're not having fun anymore and the people around you are exhausted too. The other common situation I see is an entrepreneurial company's been built. You have a leadership team. There is a visionary and an integrator, but you haven't clarified the two roles and agreed where the lines of separation are. And so the perception of everybody in the organization is the two of you are co-running the company. And in the world of an accountability chart in an EOS company, you can't have two people accountable for one major function, especially running the company. And so you've got to clarify and separate those roles and make sure everybody knows who does what, or you're going to have bedlam ensue.
I agree. In fact, even in just the sales portion of running that company, if you have someone that's responsible for lead generation and another person that's supposed to be responsible for closing and then follow up, and it's kind of like we're all in this together, hands on deck, something gets missed.
Yeah.
There's overlap or there's a big gap, and it's a recipe for disaster. Like
sports analogy number one for today's podcast is you get the pop fly to the shallow outfield where, occasionally somebody catches it, but more often than not, three people run into each other or all three go, "You've got it," and it drops to the ground. So that's what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah. You want to be on Sports Center, but not for that.
That's right.
I read a few of your articles, and one of them in particular that I'd like you to kind of elaborate on is you mentioned that you need to solve business issues slowly. That's counterintuitive to the American way, my friend. We want action now. Tell us about why we need to solve these things slowly, please.
Yeah, so that article in particular is about in the rush to solve a lot of issues, you never really solve any of them. And what we talk about in that article is that at the end of having a conversation about something that's frustrating you, everybody on your team needs to be crystal clear and aligned around exactly what we've just decided, with nobody withholding their support for that decision. We don't need everybody to agree. That's consensus, and it'll kill your business faster than anything else. But we do need everybody to agree not to take their ball and go home. We need everybody to fully support the decision we just made. And assuming that decision leads to action, which 97% of the time it does, we need to be crystal clear on exactly what action and who's going to take it. And we need to write it down, and we need to have a process for checking back on whether or not they follow through on that action a week from now or a quarter from now, or you did a lot of talking and nothing is going to change. That's what that's about. It's not take your time solving the issue. It's make sure you take the time to ensure that the solve actually happens and that we're all aligned around it. We call that tying a pretty little bow or a tidy little bow around your solution to the issue.
Which ironically solves the problem faster if you simply try to rush and you never solve the problem.
Right. So when I told you I fell in love with EOS, this was in every organization I've ever been a part of, we were really good at discussing the heck out of issues. Really good. We could discuss till the cows came home. Did we ever really get agreement around the table about what was causing the issue? No. And did we ever really solve anything, which means agreeing on a plan of attack that we're all confident is going to make it go away forever? No. And so if you're experiencing that pain and suffering, please look into EOS, read the book Traction, focus on the chapter about issues solving, because it will make a huge difference in your life. In every entrepreneurial company, in the banks I worked at, we would have lots of long meetings with no resolution. And there's nothing more frustrating than walking into a meeting tomorrow, and as you walk out after 4 wasted hours, you have that horrible business deja vu where you say, God, this feels like we did this 2 years ago and we're still dealing with the same issue. That's what I want your listeners to never have to deal with again. And I think EOS is a great way of solving that problem.
Well, not only do you resonate EOS and obviously believe in it, but we appreciate your enthusiasm behind it too. Yeah. Here's an interesting question for a guy from the Midwest. Why should we beware the seagull?
Yeah. So you're just trying to goad me into wildly inappropriate language, which I will fulfill shortly. So Listener alert, you might want to mute yourself here for a while. So one of the dangerous behaviors I see on leadership teams when I start working with a team is you'll have a visionary founder or a board member or a part owner that doesn't want to be accountable for anything, but wants to participate in every meeting and chime in where he or she has a strong opinion. And I call that seagull management. And what it does in a room full of people who are actually accountable for executing on the company's vision and achieving the company's potential, maximizing its potential, those people are busting their tail every day and they own success and failure and suffer it acutely. And when somebody who doesn't comes into a meeting, hasn't been participating in everything that's been going on for the last quarter, listens to what's going on, and then poo-poos it or disagrees with it, it's seagull management. You fly in, shit all over everybody else, and fly away with no accountability. Nobody likes that. Cut it out. That's seagull management. And if you want to participate in the way your business is running, fully engage and be accountable for what you're accountable for. And if you just want to be somebody sitting in the bleachers yelling at the players, nobody likes that either. Okay? Play the game.
Yeah, it doesn't work very well, at least not very long term. You know, Paton, you talk about the 6 key components, and I don't want to assume, but I believe that vision, would you say vision is the most critical? Is it the cornerstone? And then,
what we believe is that every one of the 6 key components is as important as the other 5, because I've seen a lot of clients that came into the process really strong in 3, 4, or 5 components, but it's the 1, 2, or 3 where they're struggling, where all of the problems seem to be coalesce. So it's completely interdependent and totally holistic. It's, we treat the whole body when we're working with a leadership team. We don't focus on any one thing. And I watch a lot of entrepreneurs waste time saying, my problem is people, so I just got to go get the right people. Well, if you don't have a crystal clear vision and you don't have a strong process component, how the heck do you know you have great people? Because you don't have a roadmap and you don't have processes for how to go execute on that roadmap. So they're interdependent. I can tell you where most of my clients and the people I talk to in the workshops want to spend time is talking about people and traction. And the reason they want to talk about traction is because they perceive that they're surrounded by people incapable of gaining it. So it all comes back to people for me. EOS is a system for harmonizing human energy. And if you have humans in your business and they're not executing on your vision the way you'd like, EOS can help with that.
That's great. Now, I do find that the vision seems to be, at least in my perspective or perception, the neglected piece to this wholesaling role. We want the process. We want to hire the best wholesalers that have the relationships that can bring the money, which is the traction. But it's been very rare where I've seen like a sense of a company vision. It seems to be all about the money.
Yeah. So I'll spend a couple minutes talking about how we do that for a whole company, and then I'll let you fill in the blanks for how it might work for the wholesaler. So, what we see is the challenge in an entrepreneurial company isn't a lack of vision. It's not that there's no vision. In fact, if you ask a visionary, are you clear on your company's vision? And do you think everybody else is too? 99% of the time, they're going to answer yes. Why? Because it is pretty clear in my own head. And because I'm a scary enough dude with my name on the sign that nobody who works for me is going to walk into my office and say, hey, Paton, I just wanted to let you know I have no earthly idea where our company is going and how we plan to get there and what my role is in doing that. That is what we call career limiting. So the visionary is sitting there thinking everybody's clear and on board, but they're not. And everybody else in the organization is trying to be clear and on board. And in doing so, they create their own version or variation of the vision. And you end up with too much vision. Everybody's singing from a slightly different sheet of music, and then bad stuff happens. And so when we're working with a leadership team, the first thing we do is we get all those visions out of their head into the middle of a conference table, and we say, We need one vision. Let's get everybody aligned. Where are we going? Who are our ideal customers? What kind of work do we do better than anybody else on the planet and really love doing? And we answer those very basic questions. There are 8 questions on the VTO, and it creates absolute clarity, simplicity, and certainty about who we are at the core, where we're going, and that makes the document, the Vision Traction Organizer, or the VTO, a really good tool for in the trenches decision making that everybody in the company could use. So, if a wholesaler out there is unclear on where the company's going, who the ideal customer is, what it is our unique ability, which is a Dan Sullivan term, or genetic encoding, or our passion or core focus, which is the EOS term is, that tool can be really helpful in clarifying those things, which helps you execute better.
Yeah, and I quote you saying that it doesn't matter how great your vision is, it's the agreement around it that matters.
Correct.
If they don't agree with your vision, then you'll not be able to execute without what you call regular, painful intervention from you.
That is correct. What I call the head coach standing on the sidelines yelling instructions because the team isn't equipped with everything they need to make their own decisions on the fly and play the game well.
Yeah, it's also the same as if the first sergeant is standing out in front of his 120 soldiers trying to give them all individual direction.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the recipe for disaster for sure. Now, you mentioned that the part of the problem solving is to make sure that your team is great at solving their own problems as they arise.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah. So we're talking about strengthening the issues component. And when we do that, we ask our clients to implement 2 tools or disciplines to do that. The first is the creation of an issues list, which a lot of people misinterpret as like putting a suggestion box in the lobby. That doesn't work. And anybody who's ever done that knows it doesn't work. We need better snacks in the snack machine, right? Or off-color inappropriate jokes often end up in the suggestion box too. So what we're trying to do is create a culture where people in the organization feel comfortable raising their hand and say, hey boss, we got an issue. Customer's unhappy. I don't know how to do some part of my job that I do every day and I keep screwing it up and I could use your help. And that requires a lot of courage. And the phrase "don't shoot the messenger" is a sign into how much fear there is around that. What that literally means when your people walk up to you and say that is they're afraid you're going to murder them for being honest with you about a problem. And so you got to take that kind of stuff seriously. There's always a little bit of truth in sarcasm. And so just be careful about that and create a culture where people chime in. What I say to leadership teams, Mike, when I teach them that is, but if we do that and then the leadership team, or worse yet, the visionary, the founder, the owner, is the only person in the organization equipped with the tools to solve those issues, you're going to be the guy replacing the empty toilet paper roll in the men's room when it's out, dealing with the 2 employees who argue about the same parking spot every day. Leadership teams shouldn't worry about that stuff. So we teach a tool called IDS, Identify, Discuss, Solve, to literally every human in the business who's in a meeting on a weekly basis and has the opportunity to put issues on their own issues list, tee them up, identify the real root cause, that's the I, discuss briefly with their teammates what they could do to solve it, decide to solve it by implementing a plan of attack that'll make it go away forever, and taking action on that plan, and that's the solve. And by that, we're helping these teams of people solve their own issues.
Yeah, I love it. Huge fan, and congratulations on your success thus far. But like I said, you got the cloak on or the cape on now and the crown on now. So, Paton, tell us what does the next 5-10 years look like for you and for EOS?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little history just to clarify a couple of things. So Gino tapped me on the shoulder about 7 years ago, and we started. He was very mindful and planful about his succession plan out of the visionary seat, and he had no intention of being the face of this organization forever. And he tapped me on the shoulder and asked me to consider taking over in that role, a great honor. And I thought about it with him as a partner for about a year before we agreed it was the right next step. I've been serving in this role for about 5 years. Come this January, took over in January of 2015. And I am about to step aside and replace myself on my succession plan as well. And so that's one of the things we see our clients struggle with a lot. And so both of us are very planful and mindful about doing that. And so the next 5 years, we are growing internationally at a rapid clip. What we've discovered is, when we start dropping books and videos and other tools and implementers into a community, entrepreneurs who want to get more from their business want EOS in its purest form. So the biggest challenge for EOS Worldwide as we move forward is going to be creating the same kind of community within our professional implementers. We have 305 people around the world right now who do this work and are passionate about helping entrepreneurs. We're probably in the next 5 years going to grow that to 700 to 1,000 EOS implementers on literally every continent. We're in 20 countries today and probably working in more. And so that's going to be the big challenge. How do we create the same sense of community and alignment and passion for helping entrepreneurs and for delivering EOS purely as we grow and expand globally, as we've been able to do in North America? And I'm super excited. I'll continue playing a role in that process, just not as the visionary. And I'll always, as long as I'm working, I'll always be a certified EOS implementer. I love this work. I love my clients, and I love helping entrepreneurs. And that's what the future holds.
Well, it's exciting, and I can speak on behalf of a lot of folks and say congratulations and cheers to your continued success. Hey, as we bring the show to a close, I want to ask you my 2 signature questions, Paton. All right. I ask all of the guests these questions. There are no wrong answers, but some answers are better than others, frankly.
And I presume you reserve the right to make fun of those answers.
Yeah, it seems to be the most commented, part of the show is the answers to these questions. All right, first one, here you go. If you could pick up the phone and on the other end of the phone was 30-year-old Mike Paton, and you had a couple minutes with him, what would you tell your 30-year-old self? What kind of advice would you give you?
It's more important to be effective than right. Listen to your heart more and your head less, and become a better listener.
Interesting. It sounds like you might have prepared those answers.
No, I didn't. Honestly, that was off the top of my head, but you're talking to a guy who's had to self-medicate a lot.
That's good. I resemble that comment, frankly. But question number 2, and this is a little more fun, I hope. And not that one wasn't fun, but this one's kind of cute. If I could grant you, Paton, if I could grant you any superpower, which one would you choose and what would you do with it?
Boy, is that tough. I would choose the superpower of knowing what people are truly thinking and feeling in their heart, because my sessions would be a million times better with my leadership teams. And there is a lot of time wasted when people are struggling to correctly articulate what they're truly thinking and feeling. And I think that would be my advice to your listeners as well is, nobody ever got fired or killed for being honest, as long as you attack the issue, not the person. So if you could get right to what you're thinking, focus on the greater good of the organization faster, life's going to be a lot better for you, a lot better for your boss, a lot better for your organization. Everybody's going to win, and you're going to sleep better at night. So that's why I'd like that superpower.
Well, you are in the majority. That is the #1 most requested superpower, frankly. And it's kind of interesting. I don't know if it's the way I ask the question or if it's just the type of guest that I'm having on the show, but everyone wants to be able to understand what other people are really thinking. And I think it's a good testament maybe to the American way and our helpful nature as entrepreneurs and coaches and
Yeah, cool.
as well.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely. You're in good company there, sir. And you're a little bit on the academic side as far as what advice you give yourself. A lot of people are a little bit more, tell me some creatively funny things like don't step in that pothole,
Well, we could have gone there, but you don't have time. You don't be mindful of your listeners' time. So.
Yeah, and that goes without saying, right? I mean, come on.
One of my favorite questions, Mike, is, so who's got issues? Exactly. And the hands all go up. So
that's hilarious. Yeah, that's hilarious. Hey, so I want to tell you personally, Paton, thanks for coming on the show today, but also thanks for being who you are.
Thank you.
You have been an inspiration. I've followed your work for the last, half dozen years, and have enjoyed reading the books that you and Gino have written, and even interacting with some of the EOS implementers in the field and some of their clients. And you have a lot of great creative individuals, and you even make me want to do this job as well, frankly. Like, I feel like I want to serve entrepreneurs and business people, and I think you've created a great platform and way for folks to do that. So kudos and thank you for that.
Well, and ditto, Mike. This was a lot of fun, and I think you're doing great work, and I think your audience is doing great work. And when EOS or I or one of our implementers can help, we want to be there and help. It's cool stuff we're doing, and I think entrepreneurs are going to make a difference in the 21st century the way big corporations and governments maybe made a difference in the 20th. And if we could all band together and focus on the greater good, I think we'll do great work together and build a path to a better future. So that's what gets me up every day, and being on your show helped me move forward in that direction. I appreciate it very much.
Oh, well, you humbled me with your compliments and your great words. I appreciate that very much. I think I could say thanks, not to try to one-up you, but on behalf of all the people that you've touched, probably thousands, if not tens of thousands of lives that you've changed with your work, and hold your head high and know that we all appreciate you. Wish you much success and fortune both now and in the future.
Thank you.
Peyton, as we say on the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, it's about the journey, and we wish you well on yours. I do look forward to seeing you again soon. And a huge thanks for everyone that's tuning in today. And if you haven't already done so, go ahead and do yourself a favor. Hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode like the one we did today. And if you really want to be cool, hit the notifications button and you'll get a little alarm every time a new episode gets dropped. Definitely appreciate everyone for tuning in today. Thanks so much for subscribing and sharing and supporting the show. And of course, most of all, thanks for being awesome. Good night, everybody.